Now we go to the second element of astrology, which are the planets. And then the third element would be the houses, the fourth element would be the aspects. But let's begin with the planets. The planets are now bringing to the next level, which is basically when you are born, the planets are somewhere in the sky, and when you are having a birth chart, it's like click, and you take a snapshot of the sky, and where the planets are in, that's basically then what they represent. And that's what I'm explaining now to you. It's like, imagine like I would speak about your personality, then the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and so on, they all stand for a different aspect of your personality. So it's like, it makes it very complex. It's not just like, oh yeah, you're a temperament, like, you know, like a blunt person, like a strong ego, and you are a bit shy when you are going into public, you know. It's like, no, it's much more complex than that. And that's exactly what astrology does. It actually explains something that we normally can explain, but we cannot differentiate and separate it so well. And that's what astrology gives us the capacity for. So I will just show you first all the planets that we have, and then I will go through them and what they mean. So we have the Sun and the Moon. They're called the luminaries because they themselves, they give light and they receive light. They're in that sense not planets in themselves. Then we have the personal planets like Mercury, Venus and Mars. Like they're so close from the Sun and the Moon that we perceive them very personal. So these five are actually called the personal planets. Then we have the social planets, the Saturn and Jupiter. And Saturn and Jupiter, for me, they belong together. They're like two wings of a bird, okay? And I will explain afterwards what I mean with that. But they belong together. And then we have the collective planets, the planets that have been discovered only like in the last centuries. We have Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, and a lot of people actually, or like Pluto has been like this graded, like it's like a dwarf planet, but I still use it as a planet. I find it very, very important. So these are called the traditional planets, the 7 planets, and then you have the modern planets. And the modern planets, they get used in the Western astrology, and in the Vedic approach, they don't even use them. I find them personally very, very important. So let's speak about these planets, because now you can understand, like, the Sun is basically when in the sign that you are born, so in the month that you are born, that's where the Sun sign is. And the Sun sign for me, it's like, imagine like embodiment, you know? It's like something that you have to grow into. It's who you are, yes, that's the traditional like naming for it, but I would much more say it's like a seed quality. Imagine that's who you are, but you have to grow into it even more. It's like, yes, you have the potential of these qualities, but you actually have to really, really step into this. I would even call the Sun, it's like your enlightenment. Like you really reach the Sun when you are yourself, in your full authenticity, in full freedom, and you're not questioning anymore yourself. You're just sharing what's alive in you. It's that simple. That's the true enlightenment of the Sun. But that's like the beginning and the end, right? And underneath there's much more complexity, and that's where we're going, for example, for the Moon. The Moon is much more like your emotional nurturement, like you could say your intuition, coming in touch with what's alive in you and what you need. So it's not just about going into a journey of enlightenment and going onto the hero's journey and going out of the house. It's like, hey, eat your breakfast, yeah? Like, nurture yourself, take care of yourself, what do you need? So it depends where the Moon is and where the Sun is. So for example, if you're a new Moon child, right, when the Moon and the Sun is together, then these two are in the same sign. What does that mean? Well, what you need for nurturing and what you need for embodiment is the same thing. It's helpful. But then it's also, it can be difficult. You know, let's say if you cannot get what you need right now, then you don't have like something else. So it's like you're really dependent on that one thing. It makes you a stronger character because you're more, you could say, like single-headed in one direction, okay? So then from there we go into Mercury. Mercury, remember, is connected with the mind. It's actually your intellect. It has to do with communication, with learning, with sharing, with listening, with expressing yourself. And then you could say now, like, to make this all more nuanced and complicated and interesting, let's say your Mercury is in a fire sign. You're probably very good in expressing yourself. You're very clear. Maybe you're very blunt. Maybe you're very direct. Oops, oh, I'm sorry I said that. I didn't want to offend you, but it's already out of my mouth. Or you are water sign, you're very emotional, you're very sensual. Maybe you speak with a lot of body language, you make a lot of gestures. You speak with your body because it's actually something that is more something that's alive in you rather than it's a word. It's more poetry. Let's say it's in an earth sign, maybe it's more practical. You take your time, you're trying to understand, like, why do you think that, you're trying to figure out if that actually makes sense, and then when you're ready you say it, and then that's the way it is. But it took you a while to contemplate on that. And if it's an air sign, then you're just really good in processing information. You're very quick. Maybe you talk too fast, you have to pace it. Nobody can follow because you're constantly just functioning so quick, and nobody is actually able to listen because you're just working on another level. So you see now suddenly, like, Mercury is like, it's the way it functions, but then it can be much more complex. And then we can even speak now more complex, not just the elements, but each sign, which is different, okay? And then we have Venus and Mars. Now Venus and Mars, like, I really like to express them as the masculine and the female quality, but I always have to kind of make a disclaimer because it's like, it's not male or female, it's really like the feminine and the the masculine approach, or we could even say positive or negative in the very sense of, like, Mars is like going out, and that can be very, like, you can have a very masculine woman in that sense as well. It's just taking what she wants, she's saying what she needs, she is having very clear boundaries, she's expressing herself very clearly, and she gets what she desires in that sense. While the feminine quality or the Venusian quality would be much more like attracting what you need by waiting. It's like a flower, sends out a flavor or and perfume, and then the bee comes to you. You didn't do nothing, you were just, bathing in your grace and getting what you want just by being yourself. And that's this flirtatious or beautiful quality when, let's say, a sexy woman just walks down the street and everybody's watching, like, whoa, like, it's not that she didn't do anything, she is also doing something, but in a different way than the externalized approach of the Martian quality, and we need both. And that's where do you have your Mars, where do you have your Venus? It's basically they come as a couple, and you could say, like, Venus is more what you attract, like what you need to find beauty in your life, and Mars is more what you, like, how do you function, like, how is your expression working, like, how do you get what you want in your life. So you see now these are the personal planets, and they are much easier to identify within our chart or within our lives because they are personal. We can feel them in our daily actions. Now the next planets, they get a little bit more complicated, and they are basically called the social planets because they're more showing how we are functioning when we are, like, in a collective or in functioning with other people, and that's Saturn and Jupiter. And Saturn and Jupiter is like two wings of a bird, because, like, one is effort, Saturn, and one is grace, and that's Jupiter. So it's never in life that you only apply effort or only apply grace. It's never just like you're working hard and you never enjoy, or you're just trusting in life and there's never applying work. They always come in a couple. So therefore Jupiter is much more about what comes to you, that where you connect with something that's for you, like I would call it like God, but it can also be, like your work. Like God can be everywhere, something that you are doing so much, like you love it so much that you forget yourself, like you expand yourself in that direction that you completely forget yourself, and you're just doing it, you're just loving it, and you are going beyond what's important for you, where you just basically don't even know who you are anymore. And in that sense, Jupiter is just that grace that can flow you, where you just know, you have trust. It's like a guardian angel that connects you with something that's, you don't even know how to call it. It's just there. So, and then Saturn would be the other side, where it's like something that you have to work on in your life, right? Something that it's not coming easily to you, something that you actually feel almost that you have lack of, or a fear in that domain that you're not enough, and you have to constantly apply effort in that domain. You constantly have to work with it, and it's not about doing it right or wrong, it's about a daily repetition through which we find mastery, through which we are finding like we're getting more comfortable, or we're realizing that we're not failing, or that actually the expectations were really high up on ourselves, but actually that people outside are not judging us so much, it's much more ourselves, and through that constant repetition we're finding mastery, and it's never enough. Like Jupiter and Saturn is never that we come to a point where this is it. It's constantly growing and learning, but that is like, I would say that finding this perfect balance where the bird can fly, because it needs to use both wings. So that's Saturn and Jupiter. And then we have the three modern planets, you could say, and they're collective. And why I call them collective is simply, like, imagine like they're so far away out in our solar system that we are in, like Uranus is actually so far away, you don't necessarily feel them personal. You don't necessarily say like, oh yeah, I have, Uranus, that's like my moon, I feel it every day. But it can be that you feel it personal if it is very close to your sun or your moon. Let's say you're born, like the Uranus is conjunct to your moon. You will feel that very strongly. Or opposite your moon. And now we're going into aspects. That's now where it gets more complex. But basically it's like, if the collective planets affect your personal planets, then you can feel them. So it can be more personal for some people, but not for everybody. And that's where you could say the collective planets, they have associations, they flavor even whole time periods, and they are moving very slowly in the sky. So it's much easier to trace the moon, because tracking the moon is like 28 days, 28 and a half days, and then you have a cycle is complete and then it starts again. So every new moon and full moon you can feel the moon, and you can kind of talk about it because it's repeating very quickly, and that's why it's the most common thing that people speak about the new moon, the full moon, because it's like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. Like, it repeats so many times, I have a feeling for that. But let's say with the Uranus, who moves like, it moves around the Earth like in 84 years. So it takes quite a while to come back. And to experience that is something that is particular. We can describe it like Uranus has a quality of shocking, of enlightening actually. It's like a lightning bolt hitting your system and waking something up that's already true for you. And it's not an intuition, it's like an intuition, it's like immediate knowing, like direct acknowledgement. And in that sense, like, it's almost like it can also, like, because it's so fast, it can also trigger something like an old memory, a trauma, like it can be, uncomfortable. It can actually bring up a lot of uncomfortable qualities, but they are in the long term for healing, because you have to face them and you have to wake up and work with them. And therefore Uranus is a quality of, you could say, like sudden recognition or sudden enlightenment, of a shocking quality, of a liberating quality. It's a little bit like electricity. It's very strong and very forceful, and you just have to comply or you deeply resist and you not grow. That's Uranus. And it has to do with the urge for freedom. It can even be a little bit arrogant, because it's just about you, it's about individuality, it's about me, I have all these things that are happening. So this is Uranus. And if you would say somebody has a strong Uranus in his chart, in her chart, you could see that in that person, you could point that out more in a person. And then Neptune then is more a planet which is very hard to describe, because imagine mist, okay? Mist is like you cannot really hold on to it, you cannot really grab it. It's there, but it's not, it's elusive. It's a quality that's like a drug. Like when the personality dissolves, what is there? There's an experience, there's a sensation, there's something that you have to get in touch with, which is more true than you, because you are not eternal, but what you experience is eternal. And coming in touch with that is beautiful. It's like it's God kissing your heart, and you have become like drunk and you want to go back, but at the same time you're denying your personality. So it's also that you're running away, you're escaping, you're denying. That's all Neptune. That's all Neptune of like dissolving your personality and seeing a bigger truth. But it's also healing, because you suddenly realize that there is something bigger than you understand, and therefore you understand the bigger picture, and you can forgive, you can heal, you can step into the pain that you have been going through, maybe in your childhood, or the rejection you have experienced, or the worries you have. But then it's also about, you have to bring that into your daily life. But this feels so true. You want to go every day back there, so therefore you take another shot, you take heroin, you do something stupid, you drink too much alcohol, and you're not living in your body anymore because there's something that you have tasted and you want to go back, and then it's like it's not healthy anymore. Actually, you are not using your body in a good way or a responsible way, and you're not really productive anymore because you're looking for that quick experience rather than building up in a long term, in an integrational way. That's all Neptune. It's a very beautiful planet. It's connected with like artists, with the eternal, or like the divine, like with gods and goddesses. Like it's all in that realm, and with drugs and addiction and abuse. And then we have Pluto, and Pluto is the last planet, it's the furthest out. Like the Pluto takes 248 years to complete a cycle, and it doesn't even have an orbital, like a round orbit, like it has an elliptical orbit, which makes it moving different to the signs. But imagine Pluto then, it's like, for me, like the way I like to explain Pluto, it's like Hades is another word for Pluto. Hades is the god of the underworld, right? And the underworld, the best name for the underworld is hell. Okay? Now hell is like, oh, this bad place. But imagine everybody of us has a hell inside of us. It's this place where we basically afraid are that there's something that is stronger than us, or that can take us over, or we don't want to show the world. That's Pluto. Pluto is basically this capacity to go to a domain, to access your deepest subconscious and go into the place where you fear most, not because you know what it is, but because you actually have no clue what might be luring in that darkness and could come out of it if you would actually go there. And the capacity to go there is shadow work, is actually bringing light into the basement, into the darkness, and seeing that actually it is not what you have feared, and that your fear was so strong, but now that you face it, the biggest healing, the biggest transformation, the biggest awakening comes out of that, and that's what Pluto represents. Transformation. It's when Pluto comes into your life, let's say transits. Transit means when it moves over something in your chart, a planet, that it activates something that can be very, very transformational. It can be, let's say, let's speak in a very scary way, like your father can get killed, or you can be abused, or you have a trauma, you move, like your parents separate, or your house burned down. Like I'm using all very extreme examples, but I just want to, it's like it doesn't have to necessarily be like that, but it's like in your inner world something is falling apart, and it's like the phoenix rising. Something is born out of that, like a maturity, a strength, a realness, an authenticity, because you have been there, you have seen the abyss, and you have been moving through, and you have survived, and you know now that you cannot be shaken that easily, and that's what Pluto represents. And you see the way I talk about it, it's one of my favorite planets. So, these are all the planets, and now the question is like where they are in your chart, and then let's say Pluto, where is it, what is it connected with, and then how does this speak to you personally? Then we bring the zodiac signs and the planets together and speak about that, and every astrologer has a different approach. It depends on the astrologer, but to his personal life, to his study, the more practical he can become. There are astrologers that speak very elusive, very kind of in the realms of gods, and like just in images, and that abstracts like concepts where you learn maybe a lot. My approach is just I try to be as practical as possible, try to include the person in my conversation, asking you for feedback. I would say it behaves like that. How do you feel when I say that? Can you explain to me in your life where you feel that? And then you're going into a deep personal exploration of the self and bring light into who you are. And hopefully, in like the best thing that I can imagine, what I see in my work is like when it brings just confirmation. It's like what you say is actually what I already felt, what I can feel, but I'm not sure, it's not clear. But now that you express it in this way, you give me permission to be myself. And then that's it. You can be yourself, and now you apply that in your daily life until you come back and you doubt again, you're not sure, life has changed and moved, and it's bringing you the next difficulty, the next quest to grow and to learn, and you need a reading again. You need somebody who's mirroring you, who's sharing, shedding light upon processes that are alive in you, to acknowledge, to come actually back to understand that you're constantly changing, you're constantly moving, you're constantly growing, and that you're everything, and therefore you are that awareness which is behind seeing everything constantly moving and becoming the eye of the storm and becoming happy to play the role that you're supposed to play in this lifetime. That's for me what astrology does and how I apply it.